And if you can't really tell, you plant it about 2/3 of the pot in the ground, about 1/3 of the pot out of the ground.
Okay.
Now, if you're balled and burlapped, you're gonna do the same thing. But your ball and burlap is a big thing like this, a big tone like that. Well, roots are going out like this, like a flat pancake. They're not really down deep. That's only in the nursery.
Okay.
Where the roots fill up down there.
Okay.
So when you take a ball and burlap, you take all the burlap and stuff off, you're gonna shave 6 inches right off the bottom of the thing right away. You don't want those roots down there.
You would cut those roots?
Yeah, just cut those roots. And then cut about 1 inch off all the way around the root ball. Because even if there have been cut roots, if there's any roots going around, you want to cut those. Now, I didn't find any girdling roots. Because see, normally when they get planted in the ground too deep, what'll happen is a root will girdle right around this trunk right here. And that'll cut off flow of water nutrients. Because you can tell, this root right here, that's going out here. And then when it gets out about here, it divides like this. And all kinds of roots gathering water nutrients.
Okay.
Well, all it's doing is bringing that this way. And the cells that are connecting all to here are built like a garden hose. I mean, they have little membranes between the cells. But it's basically taking water and nutrients out here, moving it up to here.
Okay.
And the carbohydrates the leaves are making, the food, the actual food the leaves are making, are coming down and different kind of cells. Well, if you cut it off like this, wrap it around like a girdling root, that cuts off the flow of water and nutrients.
Okay.
But I didn't really see that in the one over there. Now you might be able to dig in some of these other ones and find that. Typically when you see like a large wound on the bottom side there, and you know, well, we didn't hit that. We didn't hit with a mower, we didn't hit with a line trimmer. What's that caused by? Well, the cells down below connected to that root died.
Okay.
So those cells died, and that's why you get that wound going up the side, and yet it'll still connect from callus wound tissue. To see, that even tried to form callus wound tissue, and I wonder if actually that tree is even still alive. So you can see, stay right there.
You think that tree's too close to this one?
Well, I think it's a little close if you're going to have these get up in size. I mean, it's just going to get self-shaded. It's not going to do as well. You see all this tissue right here? That's called callus and woundwood tissue. That's reacting, closing the wound. Once the cells die, the tree can't reanimate them. That's dead cells, and that's the way it's always going to be. All right, and the middle of every single tree is that way. The cells that make up the middle of the tree are the same cells when this tree was only this big. So when the tree was a baby like this, the very same cells that built that tree, all it is a layer on top of it. It's built more like a tapered candle. You know, when you dip the wick in there, bring it up, it cools off, dip another. So it adds layers and layers. But the cells are moving things up and down like this. I think these trees might be a little close. To me, they're not really worth saving. But once again, you take this pear tree and you say, okay, well, let's prune this out of the way and maybe this will go. But I don't think this tree's worth saving.
Okay.
Not large wound, not much production here. Now, you can also prune these things, and this is where you just have to determine for yourself. See, here's some other evidence of other things going on, too. There's critters living in here. Yeah. And they might be eating some of the roots, but not seriously. I didn't find a whole lot of grubs or other things like that. And that's usually what raccoons and possums, things go for. You'll see them digging holes in, getting the grubs and stuff. But I don't see an abundance of grubs. And these trees have grown. They have grown. But there are some environmental conditions that would affect them that you don't see until years later. Record drought, 2016. If these never got any irrigation and the roots are forming that year, it might have been damaged. Well, you don't even see that till 2 or 3 years later, because the cells that made up those roots just didn't get as much. So they didn't spread out as much. But some of these trees, like I said, the ones that are obviously gone are more than halfway gone. I wouldn't bother trying to save, I just get rid of them. And when you go to prune something like this, here's what you always want to remember. Where a branch forms, that's where it stays. This branch right here, which is going up there, a lot of people call them suckers, water sprouts, or whatever. It's going up in there. It's never going to change its form or shape or direction. It's always just going to get thicker. So that's going to conflict with this right here. So when you go to prune, that's what you want to remember. What do I prune off? Prune off branches that are going to get in the way structurally. Now, if you want to bring the tops down, knock yourself out. You can cut the tops back real hard and watch pear trees just shoot straight up right after that. So they just keep shooting straight up, so you have to prune regularly if you want to reduce the height. Now, if you have ways of harvesting up there and you want to harvest some of the fruit up there with a ladder or something like that, or even a bucket lift or something, great, wonderful, you don't have to do it. But pruning to thin them out is much more important than pruning to top them down. Okay. Okay, now, when you do things like pear trees, well, it's obvious. I mean, if I want to mow here, this is going to be in the way. But I also want this branch because I can harvest fruit off of it. So you just got to pick and choose, where's my height difference? I mean, I can see right now, we're all like, okay, we're going to be soccer players. There's our NBA basketball player back there. If he's mowing, then he's going to have to take this branch off. But again, you can, I mean, this is an awful lot of orchard to put mulch rings around, so don't go crazy doing mulch rings.
Okay.
Just be careful mowing and trimming at the base of the trees. You don't want to damage the base, but you can get away with spraying Roundup or a chemical or a vinegar or something like that to get weed control underneath here. But don't go crazy either. I mean, like that right there. There's a cluster of all kinds of weeds and grass and stuff like that. Okay, you got your big mower in here. Now what's left you couldn't reach, you send somebody in, get one of these guys to come in with a weed whacker and mow that down. A tree like this, you can see at this time, if we don't have buds on it,
Right.
it's gone.
Right.
And if that tree were half alive, you've got to determine, is it worth saving? It's not worth putting time into to try to get something off. It's never going to be anything good. But you got a couple here that it's definitely worth pruning and keeping alive and keeping going. By all means, it's definitely worth it.
So is this one worth?
Oh, I think these two right here are definitely worth it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, some of your other trees here, the way I determine it, and it's personal. I mean, there's no hard, fast rule about it. If you have fruit trees here and you're getting production of fruit off of them, even if only half the tree's alive, is it producing enough fruit for you?
Okay.
Yeah, keep it, by all means. But you'll find out that once the tree is more than a third of it's gone, like 1/3 of the tree is actually dead, you'll find that it continues to decline because it just can't produce enough carbohydrates to keep the whole tree alive.
Okay.
But it's not always the case, especially in fruit trees. So in fruit trees, for instance, if a storm came through and just broke these all right in half, you'd watch them put out sprouts like this by the hundreds. It would just put them right out like crazy. It'd be another year or two before you got fruit because these sprouts put out a lot of cellular growth for wood tissue, and then making flowers later on is not important. It's going to put out a lot of growth, a lot of stems, a lot of leaves, but it's not going to spend energy making flowers. I got to get leaves first. But once it does that, you by all means can just keep them going. These can become branches. So as a matter of pruning, here's a great choice. If I'm keeping this branch, this guy's going straight up in the middle of the tree. I don't want it. But this guy's bringing up some space, and I got flowers. So there's potential this is going to become a branch like this, or even like that, or even like that. And that will become a branch that I can harvest fruit off of, and it's filling this space. Over here, well, where is this guy going? Yeah, he may be getting
Straight
flowers
up,
and fruit on him, but now I got to determine when this branch gets to be that thick, which may be years, and in fact, in a pear tree may never get to be that thick. You may want to look at that and say, you know, I don't have to take that whole thing off. I'm still getting fruit off of that. I may trim it back a little bit, but I'm going to let it sit there because maybe it gets as thick as an arm. You know, maybe it gets an arm thick or leg thickness. Well, you know, it's still got space. But here's more a matter of just directing the pruning to where do I want the pieces to be and can I harvest them? Technically, going by the old rules, you would take a branch like this right here. And anything that's curving this way, that's what we're keeping because that's where I can harvest fruit off of. Even the little guys, even those little guys who are running around could reach this for harvesting fruit. So you could keep that branch there and keep several of these here. But piece that goes up and over that way, well, do I want to keep that? And when you thin a tree, when you prune to thin a tree, the whole idea is that when these trees are thinned out, when they get rains like this and they're soaking wet, well, when the breeze comes through and the day starts to dry them off, they dry off a lot quicker. So if they're really thick and you don't get the air circulation, especially in the middle of summer, with all the leaves on them, fruit hanging on them, you're not going to get that air circulation inside the tree, so it won't dry out as quick. So what happens? You have leaves and fruit wet at nighttime when in the summertime. Well, what does fungus love? And that's all these spots are is fungus. Fungus loves warm, dark, wet. So now my leaves are covered with rainwater, and it's getting to be 9:30, 10:30 at night, and it's dark. These spot fungus like crazy. Now, you can spray for fungus, but if you spray fungicides, you have to start right about now, just as the buds break. My personal preference is wait till the flowers are finished, because the flower petals are all going to drop off. It's almost a waste of material. Okay, so you're spraying fungicides and an insecticide combination usually, and you're going to do a leaf cover spray. So you're coming out here with almost a vulgar mister kind of thing. The whole idea is to coat everything with a fungicide spray. But as the fungicide coats the leaves, what it does is it's like a thin layer of, well, it's a fungicide, but it's a thin layer, almost like a plastic layer. Well, as the weather moves the leaves around and as the leaves expand and grow, that cracks. Hence, that's why they recommend anytime you buy the product, spray every 7 to 14 days. So every couple of weeks, you're spraying again just to recoat it. and that's just to prevent fungus from attacking the trees. Now, is it necessary? Probably not, depending on how productive you want it to be. If you're producing for an income, you may need to invest in things. If you're producing for, we want to just can this stuff, we're going to share it, we're going to eat it ourselves, we're going to have fun, we're going to fruit, but we're not trying to sell, this is not part of our income, then I personally don't recommend going crazy with the fungicides. Maybe once in a while, but anytime you put any kind of fungicide that's a synthetic material into the atmosphere, it changes the environment.
Right.
So you got to be a little bit careful with that. And anytime you spray insecticides, that's a chemical, not an oil, mind you, like there's horticultural oils.
Yeah.
They are simply an oil.
Yeah, neem oil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way that works is you have to contact the insect with that. So that contact coats the insect, and the oil fills the sphericals on the side of the abdomen, and it chokes them. They can't breathe. But that's different. And once again, unless you have scaled insects or something like that, which I don't see a whole lot on these at all, there's a lot of mosses and stuff growing in these trees, but that is simply mosses and lichens like this. That is simply a matter of there's sunlight and there's moisture on the bark. And these are opened up because of things breaking or because of their location, so these get to grow.
So is that okay?
Yeah, they don't hurt anything. All it indicates is that a tree is possibly under stress. You can see that tree right there covered with moss.
Yes, okay.
Well, that's because it had opened up and a lot of dead and sunlight got in there. And remember, bark itself, the bark, what we call the periderm, is made up of dead cells. So as the tree grows and expands, these dead cells act like a sponge. Well, if they hold water, well, lichens don't need much of anything to start growing. Lichens will grow on rocks. So the lichens and moss will grow on here. It can indicate a stressed tree, but here I would just say, no, it's probably indicating you just live in a moist, wet area. And here especially, because you are in the middle of the mountains, your air circulation is very different than where I live out in Chattanooga, in a suburban neighborhood. This is very different. Your humidity levels will stay different here, much higher humidity, much lower temperatures. And that's all because these hills and mountains just trap it all. Remember, cool air stays here, hot air goes here. So right down in your little valley here, it will stay nice and cooler, but the humidity stays there too, so hence lichens.
Right.
I would not worry about that. On trees like that, where you see a lot of lichens, you say, well, that piece broke. Well, the tree is under stress. Why is it under stress? Well, we have environmental conditions in Tennessee that can stress trees, especially as they age. So I would go through here in this orchard and start culling out the worst trees, the ones that are like 50% dead or more. Well, hi guys. Kids been following me around since I got it. Yeah, I know. It's chatter, chatter, chatter. So I would be culling out, and just like he said, give each tree that has value more room and space. And then when you go to prune, I saw somebody bringing along a pole pruner.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you go to prune, it's just a matter of if you can get that. Yeah. Oh, you got more information than
Yeah.
That's like a Master Gardener class. Holy cow. Anyway, when you go to prune, the general rule in most pruning is don't remove more than a quarter of the tree in one pruning event. Now, how do you tell that? They say, well, how do I know a quarter of a tree? Well, start measuring and looking at branches. How many branches this thick could I take out? Well, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's about 3 of them in there. Well, I could take out 2 or 3 of these whole things and still not be a quarter of the tree.
Okay.
So when you go to prune, you start to prune thinner pieces up there. You start picking and choosing. Okay, well, I might pick this guy. Well, I could prune out a dozen of those, that thickness. One here, maybe this guy over here, and maybe a few more things up there. That would really open it up, and you're still not getting anywhere close to a quarter of the tree.
Okay.
So don't be afraid to prune out quite a bit. And in orchards, now the old adage, the old saying, now they don't use this anymore because it's all automated. But back in the day when nothing was automated, it was all done by hand, the old adage for pruning fruit trees is, when you finish pruning a fruit tree like an apple tree or a pear tree or even a cherry tree, you need to be able to throw a live cat through the tree. That's how thin it should be. Okay, give me a live cat, pick it up by the gruff and throw it through the tree. Can't grab anything, that's how thin it would be. Now they don't recommend that anymore.
Or throwing the cat or trimming the tree.
Well, I've had some cats in my life that I would gladly throw through the tree. But they don't use that anymore.
Okay.
Now you want some interior growth going on.
Okay.
Simply because any little branch and twig, this little twig right here with leaves is making carbohydrates that get pushed right to about here. And these branches located here, they're pushing their carbohydrates onto the trunk here. Hence the trunk gets thicker.
Okay.
Most of the carbohydrates and leaves up there are getting pulled down here also. But it gets moved all over the tree in all kinds of different places. But if you'll notice, if you took the whole top out of this tree, you'll get growth like that at the base, like crazy.
Okay.
Although I think this is not part of the tree. I think this is all Chinese privet. So if you wanted to get rid of something like this, grow at the base of this tree, now I don't like to promote chemicals, but it's really the only good way to get rid of this. Cut those stems down as low as you can, and you have your little bucket of sitting here, just Roundup concentrate. There's a little tail right there. As soon as you cut those down, move everything off to the side. The top of the stump is like this. Just paint the top of the stump with Roundup concentrate. And you do that in the spring, you cut it flush. If you wait till summertime, you would cut it up higher here and paint the entire stump. But you could cut your Roundup in half. You know,
Is there any way to do that without using Roundup?
You could try white vinegar, and that may help some, but white vinegar does not get translocated through the tree.
Okay.
Okay, white vinegar is a salt, it's a desiccant, and it will kill the cells it hits. But with Roundup, it's a chemical that's actually designed to get moved inside the tree.
Mm-hmm.
So the cells take it, does a process called translocation, a movement from cell to cell to cell. Now what Roundup and similar chemicals do is they destroy that membrane that goes between the two cells. So everything just flows out. And it also stops cell division at the tips, which is why when you cut it, the big cell division is at the base of the tree. So the trunk's like this. Let me see if I can do a demo. Well, sort of. Anyway, when you cut the trunk, where most of the cells are that are doing the cell division for growth are around the outer perimeter. Once again, remember the cells in the middle of the tree are at least inactive and quite often dead. You ever notice when you cut a tree down, they have the dark center? They call it heartwood. Well, it's called heartwood because, and it's dark is because it's filled with waste material. That's how it gets dark. But it can't move. There's no cell division, can't move chemicals, can't move anything, can't move carbohydrates, can't do a thing. The sapwood, with that white wood, most of that just sits there with some sugars and carbohydrates stored in it. But it doesn't really move it until the tree really needs it. Most of the movement of carbohydrates coming down the tree, water, nutrients, and elements going up the tree are in a ½ inch to an inch underneath the bark. That's it. Those are the only cells that are active. It's that cambium layer. When you scrape the bark off and then it's liquidy, and you think, oh, that's water, that's sap. That cambium layer, that slime, that's where cell division is actually taking place. So the cells divide into...
Cut it off and show us? Or?
Well, no, I did that. I did
Okay.
that. But yeah, all right. Well,
What would be the drawback of just keep cutting these things down real low?
Yes.
Is there a drawback? Is it robbing the tree?
No. Those are completely invasive plants, so you just want to get them out of the way.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
you could just
completely
keep cutting them
separate
down if you didn't want to do the Roundup.
Right. If you just keep cutting them down, and it has no way of making food, getting the leaves to make carbohydrates, eventually the plant dies.
Okay.
The problem with this is it's Chinese privet. So Chinese privet is extremely aggressive and assertive, and it's going to take year after year after year, just keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back. And your other one aggressive like that is the vine you see climbing here, the Japanese honeysuckle vine, which smells great, but it's another plant that if you don't treat it with a chemical, it's going to come back. But eventually, like I said, if you just keep cutting it, if it can't make carbohydrates, eventually it dies. When you go to cut a plant, or cut a branch off of a tree, once you decide, I'm cutting that off, the best way to do that, I'm going to do this one right here. One thing you always want to remember is don't leave stubs. Don't leave a long stub, and you don't need to make a large wound cut like that. What you want to make is the smallest wound possible, as close as you can get. So if I want this guy gone, the first thing I'm going to do is take the pressure off. All right, now I just took the pressure off. The weight of that is off, so I can pull that out of there later. But I'm doing my finished cut right here. That should be the finished cut. You don't need wound paints. The callus ring will form over that and close that wound. That's all you really want. That's all you want, is just close the wound. And then once again, now I got that piece out of there, I might take maybe that one, definitely these two pieces here, definitely this piece here. And you can see once you got those out of there, the tree starts to open up. You get all that clutter out of the middle. All your harvesting's out here anyway. But you can do the exact same thing, bringing the tops down just by coming back. Here, for instance, is a great example. If I were to come back and say, this is the top of the tree. That's the height I don't want. I want to come back to a lateral branch. You just cut here. And you do the exact same thing. You come down to a branch going this way. All right, so if this is the top of the tree, and my lateral branch is this way, I want the top going, just cut it right here. And that's your low lateral branch. Now, on all fruit trees, as soon as you do that, from here, you'll see a little sprout come up, especially near the top. Here it may not. If you do the cuts right, you're going to minimize reactive growth sprouts. So that wound will start closing. And like I showed you before, the callus tissue will start closing that wound. What you got to decide is which trees are worth pruning and sending time in, and which trees are not. But I get the pole pruner out and just start thinning them first, and then take it from there. I would not worry about the tops if you don't care. Now, here it's a little bit different situation because you have a genuine orchard. Many times, many of my clients have a couple of fruit trees in their yard, and I tell them, don't top it down. Here, you may want to top them if you want to harvest everything. Otherwise, what you do is you say, okay, the birds and the bees can have the top third, and I'll harvest what I can from the bottom. Well, good luck protecting the bottom fruit from the birds and bees going up there. You know, you can put netting, you can put sprays, you can do all the stuff you want. And hot pepper sprays will be a good deterrent for deer and animals, but not birds. Birds don't taste hot pepper. So it's like, oh, son of a gun, they're still going to eat it up. So when you're going to deter birds and other animals from eating your fruit, then you're going to get into more physical barricades, not chemicals or sprays or deterrents. Because you can spray deer deterrent all you want. First rain, it's gone. Come back out and do it again. So, and you know what deer deterrents are? It's mostly wolf urine. So, who wants to spread that around? Yeah, it's okay. And it'll scare wolves and deer and all that around. But once again, as soon as it rains, it's all gone. Okay, it rained the other day. I'm going to let things dry out. I'm going to come and do my wolf urine spray around here again. And it's going to be fine for a couple of weeks until it rains again. Or a couple of weeks just to weather them. Just the humidity of dew will be enough to dilute that.
Okay.
So you got to be careful when you do it. I mean, it's okay. You can try to get, just a tire crew come out here. Okay, you guys, go give me a pea perimeter around my orchard. Everybody, it won't last.
Yeah.
It won't last. Where we live on the east side of Chattanooga, East Bend, it's a very suburban neighborhood. Now, we're surrounded by people who have deer problems. We've never seen deer on our property, 2 in 20 years, because we've always had large dogs peeing the perimeter and marking their territory.
Oh, yeah.
Deer come up and smell that. That's a big old dog. And I mean Great Danes, Irish Wolfhounds, big dogs. So when they leave their marker, it's a big marker.
Right.
Little tiny dogs leaving little markers here and there don't do a whole lot. I mean,
Sammy is telling him.
but you can get, the only way to really deter deer and other animals is a pack of dogs that run free and have the autonomy of we're going to get anything that runs. Now you can't have that here.
Right.
Right. And all the other valuable things. Unless you have really well-trained dogs. I mean, that's up to you. But dogs and cats are some of the best deterrents for wild animals.
Okay.
Yeah. If you don't want, I tell many of my clients, you don't want a rodent in your garage, get a cat. We had dogs that stayed in our garage. That was our home, so they had free reign of the property. We had the wire going around the property. We still had rats get into our garage and chew on my wife's car. $5,000 worth of damage.
Wow. Oh my
Chewing
God.
on the interior stuff underneath the hood of the car.
Wow.
Yeah, she went to start it one day, it didn't start. We opened the hood and saw it shredded. Everything.
Wow.
Hoses, wires, shredded. Now, granted, it was an Audi, that's why it was so expensive, but still, you get the point. I have a Ford pickup. She gets the Audi. Who wants this one?
I'll take it.
Okay.
Hey, a quick question. On
Sure.
these branches that are really low,
Yes.
and fruit's going to start growing, they're going to pull them down and
Yep.
virtually hit the ground. Do you want that to happen, or should you?
Well, it
prune
doesn't
them a
hurt.
little
It's
bit?
more a matter of if it's going to hit the ground, anything that's too low, it's in the way.
Yeah.
That's a matter of you just got to make the decision, am I sacrificing my fruit by taking this off right here
Right.
and reducing the weight load on this? And one of the ways you do that is once you prune, you take your pole pruner and just hang it on there. See, that's a weight load. That's enough. Once the fruit's on there, you'll see how much your weight load. Like this branch here gets all the fruit that you hope for.
Yeah.
And these are all fruiting spurs. These haven't even bloomed out yet. These are still all fruiting spurs. Once I get that weight load on it, will it be down to here?
Yeah.
Can you tolerate that? Well, yeah, I still got to mow
Can the
around it.
branch tolerate? That was the other
Yeah.
thing. Would it break that? Would it be beneficial
Yeah.
maybe to take a little piece off? Of
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the general rule is you measure for this branch here, follow this branch all the way back to here. Now, that's one piece of this piece. So we don't conclude all to here. Because technically, theoretically, I could take this off right here and that could be my new branch. But if I follow this out, say, I want this, well, I have 1, 2, 3 coming from here, and four pieces out here that are all going to give me fruit. I can take this piece off right here.
So you would
And-
cut that whole thing off?
Yep, you could technically, theoretically cut that whole thing off, and you still have plenty of branches to get fruit. If it were me, I'd be like, this one here and this one here, right to there. But then I look at this and say, that piece is going up there, this piece is going over here. If I take these two off, maybe this will grow, but if it grows, it's still in the way. Well, 1, 2, 3, now I'm taking it off to here. It's like, well, if I'm taking these 3 off, take it back to the next joint. But then I'm looking at this and say, okay, now I got these 3 back to here. Well, this one's also interfering. Am I keeping this? Am I keeping that? It really comes down to choosing which ones you want where. Now, once again, if you're the one doing the mowing and you have to hand trim mow around this, yeah, you're ducking all the time.
I'm mainly worried like if the branch won't be able to support the fruit and just
Yes.
break off.
Yes,
then-
and the more it goes laterally, the more chance of that happening.
Yeah.
Because the branch stays wherever it formed. Like this branch here will never go up and down on the tree.
Yeah.
All this branch will do is about 3 to 4 years will look like that. That's all, but it'll be right here. So right now, this year, say, okay, this year we're gonna get some fruit off of this. But by next year, this has gotta go.
Okay.
And also depending on how much you want to have access for ease of mowing in here. If I'm going to mow in here and I want a ride mower to come between these two, well, I can do that as long as the branch I'm leaving is above my head.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm sitting at a riding mower, it's about the same height as me standing. So if I can do that. Now, you sitting on a riding mower might be different. But once again, it's a matter of, okay, this branch right here is too low for me mowing. I can take it off by piece to the next joint, until I take it all the way off. But pruning them to reduce the weight load on them, yeah, you can bring back the tips a little bit and that will help some. But anytime you take back from the tip, it's going to promote root growth back in there. Wherever there's stems back here, it's just going to promote more growth. So yeah, you can do that by all means.
Would you be able to mulch underneath the trees and
You-
get rid of mowing that way?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what many people do is you put a ring of mulch around the tree because mulch is designed in landscaping to do 2 basic things. It's a thick layer as a blanket to insulate the soil so when we get to July and August, we have soil moisture. So that's just an insulating blanket. The ANSI standards, which is that's standards for everything, says 4 inches. That's about like that for me. So 4-inch thick layer of mulch, fine. But you don't want to pile it up on the trunk. So you're coming in close to here. So your mulch starts right here, 4-inch thick layer. How wide do you want it to be? As wide as you want it to be, whatever. Because the other reason, I mean, think of it. If the roots for this tree reach easily out to where you're standing and beyond, do you want to mulch all that? Well, who's going to get that mulch?
Right.
Now, the only reason we put a mulch ring around is for mowing. Just like I said, it's just, let's make it convenient. Now, if I were to mulch these, so I'd say, okay, we want to mulch this orchard way here and make it easy for mowing. Well, I would make football or teardrop shaped because I'm coming along with a hand trim mower like this. I'm going to go like this and like this. And like that and like that. I don't want to circle around this because it's just, you got to stop and turn. And you do your trim mowing first and then your ride mower comes right behind. And you're going like this instead of around each and every tree. So design to allow your mowers to go. Now that's the way they do it in park systems to reduce the cost of mowing. It's more a matter of here, well, we're going to take out the trees we don't want. We can even pull them out. And if you go to pull the trunks out, by the way, leave good leverage up here. If you're not going to pull the trunks out, cut them down flush to the ground, your mower can like usually go over. But if you have a stump that's heavy enough, that's going to be a real pain in the ass to mow around. So you either got to grind them out or pull them out. Now when you go to pull them out, like something like that, let's say you cut it up to about waist to shoulder, and you want to pull that trunk out of there, cut the roots around the side here as much as you can. Maybe 2-3 feet away is all. Just take a shovel and cut. Just reduce the amount of grip that those roots have, and it'll pull out a lot easier. Because our roots don't go deep. Root cell division will happen wherever they have the 3 things: oxygen, enough moisture, and the right temperatures. Which is why when they're planted real deep, they get down too low, even if they've been in the ground for a while, they just don't get enough oxygen. And the roots will go out like this. But you, right in this valley especially, have a very thick layer of soil. Good layer of soil. So you can get away with doing, just about anything here. I think the biggest problem here is, when did you inherit this? When did you buy it?
Just in August. We moved here in August.
So I think a lot of this is just neglect. They hadn't done anything on these for a long time. But some of these is more a matter of the environmental conditions, like the pear over there I dug out. It's like, well, that was a little deep, but it didn't make sense to me because it would have adapted. So even if you put it in the ground too deep, here's the grade level, and the roots are down here. As the roots grow, they'll come up here. They'll find their way. But usually what happens is the root trunk down here gets rotted because it's too far in the ground. So, but I didn't find that over there either. That's what I'm guessing is going on with this one. But I think this is more a matter of just neglected. They were put in the ground and then neglected. And some of these were put in later. But these two here, I definitely think are worth definitely keeping and working on. How you prune them, like I said, you can see right there. You take some of that clutter going out of there and even take the branches, the broken ones off. Not that big a deal. The rest of it's going to be there and it's going to be opened up and cleaned out. And you're going to be able to harvest a lot of fruit off of this.
So if you're looking at a branch that has multiple branches coming off of it, what is the rule for where you want to, if you're going to cut this tip off, you need to go, like you wouldn't go just right here. Would you just have to go to a...
Right. Well, it really depends on how thick the branch is.
Okay.
Because when you get out here, the last couple years of growth, it really doesn't matter where you make your cut. The wound's going to be real small. It's going to close quickly. And every bud behind, let's say I just make an indiscriminate cut right there. Well, every bud behind it, every bud behind it is going to have the chance of popping out. And you're going to get these upright things like that. If you come back to the joint or crotch where you want to and say, okay, now I'm directing my growth to this.
Okay.
That's where the cells are already connected and they're going to start pushing that out.
Okay.
You may get a reactive stem right here at the bud and one of these, like this little piece here, go, okay, I'm back here, there's nothing here, so I'm going to get growing. And I'm going to get more resources.
Okay.
So that's the thing you want to remember is that no matter where you cut it back, it's going to grow back to where it was before. And depending on the environment changes, okay, I've pruned all these things back, now I've opened this up, well, the reactive tissue out here may go that way, or it may just curve or go right up, wherever the sunlight is. Because that's where it stimulates the most cell division, is the most sunlight. And anything that's in shade, even the slightest bit of shade lower in the tree, has a tendency to go out like this. It's not, people think it's reaching for the sun, but it's more a reaction to the sun. I don't have enough sunlight under the shade, so I'm having more cell division out this way. That's all it comes down to. Same thing with the roots, is that the roots will grow wherever they can find water, oxygen, and the right temperatures. Roots have been found as deep as 600 feet underground in caves.
Wow.
Because they're following a line of water going to a limestone cave, and it's like hydroponics. So the roots will grow there. In Kansas, in the Midwest, you'll find roots 3 or 4 feet down. They just don't spread out very much. Where we live, our soil is maybe that thick before you hit rock, chert, and clay. Roots can't penetrate it either. So our trees are built more like if you have a wine goblet glued to a plate. That's how it works. And if the wine goblet and the glue is intact, you cannot tip over the wine goblet. You can try, but the plate's going to hold it. You dissolve the glue or cut off half the plate, now things go over. But trees like this, where I can see, and don't worry about it, that was my slight wound with my trowel. Little tiny wounds like that, like if you nick this with a mower or line trimmer or something minor, they'll close in seconds. What you don't want is something wrapped around and a giant wound. That's where people make the mistake of, I'm going to hang a hammock. Well, I'm going to wrap around with a chain, and then they leave it there and they forget it. Or they brace the tree when they first put it in, and then they ignore these braces. And the tree grows, and the brace is sitting there, well, the tree's going to grow right around it. And that cuts off that flow of water and nutrients. And you can see even here, a little bit of holes. That's sapsucker damage. That's birds.
Okay.
Yellow-bellied sapsuckers, little woodpecker. They migrate, and they drill these holes. They suck the sap out until it dries up. Then they go drill another hole right
Does that kill?
No. They have been known to really damage trees like viburnum shrubs and hollies. They'll do some on fruit trees, but they almost never kill them because there's just enough gap in between the holes to allow the flow of water and nutrients. Now, if they have a whole bunch of holes and it goes all the way around the tree, which is, like I said, you'll see that quite often in hollies, then it can be really damaging.
Okay.
But on fruit trees, I never worry about it. Never worry about it. And you could do some things. There's some old wives' tales about keeping birds out of your fruit. I never liked them. Did anybody? maybe you might be old enough, but you're close to my age. You remember Minnie Pearl,
Uh-huh.
the comedian from? She had all the tags
Yes,
hanging on.
yes.
Well, one of the old wives' tales about getting birds away was hang old pie plates in your trees
Uh-huh.
because the flashing, reflecting of the sunlight and the banging, clanging. Well, that's nice, but it looks like Minnie Pearl to me. It looks like a tornado came through and knocked, brought a load of trash and loaded it into my trees.
They've
That's
done
okay.
the CDs also, like CDs.
Yes,
Okay,
they recommend CDs.
DVDs.
And if you want to do that, that's fine. Okay, if that's what you want. But I tried to do that in a fruit tree and I said, no, that's not what I want to look at. I want to look at nature. I don't want to look at like a tornado came through. But if you want to try it, it's certainly worth it. There's a lot of old wives' tale kind of things that can work. Make a note of this, and if you're recording, you'll know this. Theinformedgardener.com.
Okay.
It's Linda Chalker Scott is her name. She's a doctor, a professor out in the University of Oregon. And she has this website called The Informed Gardener. And she dispels a lot of these old wives' tales. Like, do you ever hear of compost tea? Where you're
Yes.
doing compost and you run your water through that and get that dark tea underneath.
Uh-huh.
We think, oh, this is full of nutrients. Well, her research has shown that it really doesn't do any of that. It's pretty much a waste of time to do that. Now, compost is great. Compost is a very different thing. It's a soil amendment, and that's very good. But compost tea, all the research that Jay did at her university shows, well, that compost tea really doesn't have a whole lot of nutrients, and the kind of nutrients it has doesn't attach to the soil particle. It's already been brought to leach through, so it's pretty much worthless. So you go through all that effort for
For
what?
nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for what? So check out her
Same for
website.
worm
There's a lot.
tea too.
I'm sorry?
Worm tea as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like worm casting tea and
Yeah.
but like worm castings and
My
other
friend who
things
does
like that
that.
are very different because when you add a soil amendment to your soil, what you do is you're breaking up that clay compactness of it. We have a very clay soil, but this, when I dig in this is excellent soil to me. It's not real red clay, it's nice and dark. Now granted, it's full of moisture. But this is how you tell is when we have a regular moisture day, not just after a rain, but it's been a week or so since we have rain, you bring your soil up like do like that. If it holds together, that's good. But if it really powdery and comes apart, now it's dry. So we got to get some water. But you're not loaded with clay soils. You're not loaded with a whole lot of poisonous soil. I don't think there's any, toxins or anything like that in here. I mean, there's so many places in Chattanooga. Oh, there was no glass manufacturing company here. There's all this soil that's toxic. Great. Nobody can grow anything here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had a client is right downtown, and she wanted to put fruit trees in her backyard. But the city warned her this used to be a
Oh.
waste material, so the tree roots can take up any of that toxin
Oh.
in the soil. So she's trying it anyway because you could take the fruit and measure. You can send it to a lab
Yeah.
and get it measured.
Yeah.
So, which is why you never want to use what they call systemic insecticides on fruit trees. Systemic insecticides are taken up by the roots, and you got the insecticide, the chemical inside
it,
everything,
right,
including
yeah.
the fruit. So you don't want to do that.
No.
But if you have to use a chemical, use a topical spray. My personal opinion is, if you really determine I need this year, I'm gonna. It's like this. If I have an ash tree and I want to make sure the emerald ash borer does not kill my tree, I'm putting the chemical down because there's no other way to save that tree. And I know that insect will find that tree. So if you really want to combat it, use the chemicals, but use them correctly. And the label's the law. If you use it according to the label, you're going to use the least amount of impact on the environment. But you try to reduce that. And you can reduce that by, once again, good pruning practices where you open up the tree, thin it out, get a good air circulation, keep them irrigated in times of drought. Now, 2016 was the last time we had drought that would affect these fruit trees. And I don't know, guessing that if these were planted 10, 15, or 12 years ago, 2016, did they get out and irrigate? You don't know. Well, that would definitely be a telltale sign of, okay, why did some of these trees decline? Record drought. Besides which, the fact that, as in many orchards, these roots are all growing together. They're the same sources. The roots from that tree easily reach over to the roots from this tree. So they're trying to compete for resources.
Okay.
So yeah, when you irrigate here, I don't know if you have if there's actual water line irrigation out here, like to your grapes or anything.
To the grapes, there is, but I think there's some kind of damage to it. We have a pump. There's tons of springs
Yes.
all through here.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, and so we've got a system that pumps it up to the top for gravity fed,
Yes.
and then anything.
So you can feed like a cistern or a holding
Yes,
tank?
so our house is fed by that, but then the overage goes into another tank that comes down to feed the garden,
Awesome.
But I don't think it comes out to the orchard. But there's so much water.
Right, like right there is a berm. Does that hold water back there? I mean, if you
Yes, they built that because this all used to be marsh.
Right.
Just
Right.
to hold it.
What
then
I'm
other
saying is that
springs.
if you had the chance, if you have a way that
Yeah.
if you're going to irrigate your fruit trees because we are in record drought for some reason, you don't have to be special about it.
So we could
There's
just get a
whole-
pump and
a pump and just load the water on.
Okay.
Just even flow right over the root system.
okay,
Remembering that the roots are big flat pancakes. They're not spikes that go down.
okay,
This thing about a taproot is sort of a misnomer. There's taproot in virtually every seed or nut or acorn that germinates and opens up. That's the taproot that goes down, but it only goes so far before it goes out like that.
okay.
And that's what it has to do is spread out and get research.
Do you like
Because-
the spacing of these trees?
I'm sorry, the
Do you
spacing?
like the spacing?
I
here?
think so. I agree with him though. I think these ones here that look like they were added later
Oh.
are a little close.
Okay.
And you can see the results. They're probably not doing real well. I mean, that one's gone, that one's gone. You see this little guy here, that's gone. I mean, there's not a bud left on that. So just take it down. The other one looks like it's gone too. Or maybe not though. I mean, look at the top and see, is there live buds? Is there anything coming out? And if you can't tell, just do this.
Yeah.
If it breaks, it's dead. But look here, that looks like it's live and that's bending. So there's some live.
It just doesn't seem like it'd be worth it though, because it just
Yeah,
looks.
so it's simply a matter of, if you're not quite sure, just wait. Let's wait and let's see what comes out. Because you might find just taking the dead wood out of this will be enough to thin it out. And it's still alive.
And do you think? Okay, so if you waited on this
Mhm.
and you went ahead and just pruned some stuff just for the
Yep.
heck of it, just saying, okay, it's going to die anyway or whatever.
Yep.
And then, are they far enough apart to where this might be a good distance for this tree
Yeah,
to?
absolutely. I mean, if they start to intertwine, you can prune them back away from each other. But it's really not necessary.
Okay.
I mean, it's more a matter of which is worse. Branches from the same tree intertwining and taking up space, or branches from two different trees.
Right.
It's all the same.
Right.
You know, so as long as they have enough space, they'll still be okay. But you can go to town on something like this, you know, right away and say, okay, John was here yesterday. I'm talking about today. I'm going to take off what I know is dead. Okay, is that dead? Well,
What
that's
about
dead.
doing like a serious like topping right there, so letting stuff?
You
That's
absolutely
true.
can try to rejuvenate it like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, what I would recommend, let's say you're going to top it. You say, okay, I'm going to take this out right here. 1, 2, 3. What you would do is, what I'm getting at is, you're making 3 cuts above, beyond the joint and crotches, as opposed to 1 cut below. That gives you more chances because at each
Okay.
joint, at each crotch, right here, you can see there was a stem. When it got to this point, when the bud got to this point, there was a stem that said, I got a bud this way and I got a bud that way. Well, there's a whole lot more buds in there called adventitious dormant buds, just waiting to come out. Right at the joint. Right at the joint in the crotch. So whenever you come back to the next joint, try to, and you say, I'm going to head this back, called heading back cuts. I'm going to make 2 cuts as opposed to 1 cut below.
Okay.
And look at this one here. It's literally cracking
Yep.
Right.
going up through there.
So you
Yep.
just take that one off on.
Literally.
Yeah,
underneath
that
it?
whole piece would come off right there.
Okay.
Yep.
Literally, maybe this tree cut your losses with.
Yeah, but there's still some
pardon the
life.
pun. Well, I
There's
mean,
definitely still
I'm
some
saying,
life.
you know, top it so you're not expecting anything this year.
Exactly. Plus getting the vines out of it, you know, and the breakage. I mean, you'll be able to tell there are ones that are obviously dead and there are some that are not. But yeah, you can take your time and go through each tree and say, you know what, once I clean out what I know I want out of here, all these low ones, take those all out. Take all the dead stuff that I can get the vine out of it. I mean, that looks like a muscadine grape.
Oh, really? They had those here, didn't they?
Yeah, they have a
Yeah,
They were
the
trimmed.
grape orchard will go over too, but
Yeah.
that looks like an old muscadine grape, which is a typical native muscadine. That's just fine. I've had a few clients in situations somewhat similar to yours, where they say, okay, the tree's dead, the vine has it, that's my trellis. I'm going to harvest the grapes on there. Just let the tree stand. It's temporary because eventually the tree rots away and
Right.
falls over. But yeah, I've had that happen before. But yeah, this tree here, where I'm looking at it initially and saying, it's a goner, but now that I look up in it, I can see actual live buds. They just haven't popped out yet because this tree's just.
So what is this a pear?
Yep, that's another.
Okay.
Sure looks like another pear. Sure looks like it. Yep. Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. Yes, sir.
They said that we have cherry, but I just don't.
Well, the cherries are these over here.
So what about, real quick, what about this one? What would you do?
That's another pear. And once again, I'd take off any dead and any low stuff. and let's see what comes out in live, because there's definitely some live buds up top.
Okay.
It's just a bit behind. The other ones are just getting ready to bloom. They're just healthier.
Okay.
They're healthier and happier, and this was just a little bit of a struggle. But you'll find there's some live branches here. See these little things right there?
Uh-huh.
That's a fruiting spur. So there's potential for a flower, and wherever there's a flower, there's potential for fruit. And that's
Okay.
why you want to have the diversity of the multiple trees, is that, yeah, I want to have the pollination. Well, yeah, I want more trees. All the fruit trees, all the apple trees, cherry trees, plum trees, pear trees, all of them are in the Rosaceae group of plants. So they're roses. That's
Okay.
why they're so susceptible to so many diseases. The
Ah.
same thing as all the roses.
Hmm.
But that means, what that simply means is that they have the male and female flowers in the same tree. So
Okay.
they'll pollinate themselves and you'll get fruit. But the more you can diversify, the better. Now, do you have any bee colonies?
No, but we want to, but they did have that at one time here.
Yeah, you can start a bee colony yourself if you can get a queen bee or some eggs or something like that. Just a good bee box. Right over in here is where I'd be putting it, out of the way. I mean,
Okay.
most bees are not going to bother you if you don't bother them.
Right.
You want them as pollinators.
Right.
So put them in an area where you're not going to mow around, because one thing that will really upset bees is the vibration of mowers.
Okay.
So you think you're being innocent and I'm away from them, but bees can sense a mower vibration here, even if the box is over there.
Okay.
So make sure you put them far enough away that, okay, if I'm going to mow in that area, I'm mowing first thing in the morning before the bees are even awake, or at dusk when they're all coming back in.
Okay.
Bees don't fly during the day.
So would it be okay to put them like up, where the incline is? Is that going to be too far away?
Absolutely. No,
Okay.
no, it's not too
Because
far
I
away.
know they go like 3 miles or 5
Oh,
miles or
absolutely.
whatever.
They'll have a 5-mile radius
Okay.
of wherever they find a food source.
Okay.
But the further away you put it, this is not their only food source.
Okay.
If you have sassafras trees, sourwood trees, they're going to pollinate all those too.
Okay.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
You just need to get more bee boxes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
say, okay, we'll start with one, but you'll see them expand and get a whole bunch.
Okay.
And what's the extra benefit? Obviously, the honey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's got to study up on it.
This tree's got a lot of these going straight up. Are
Yeah.
these ones you would probably be taking
Those are
off?
ones I would definitely be taking out.
Okay.
But I'd start first with the absolute worst ones first. Well, the worst ones, the dead ones, and don't count the dead towards pruning numbers. But the low ones are in your way, and then the upright ones. And once you get that done, at least this year, don't worry about the rest. Even if it looks thicker, and say, okay, look, I've got 2 main leaders really competing here, and this is competing too. Don't worry about that. You could take this whole thing off, but first things first. And once you take the low limbs off, and many of these upright suckers that you can see, obviously I'm taking these things out, stop and say, okay, I've got a quarter of that tree out of there. This year, that's all I'm doing.
Okay.
You'll see a lot of reactive growth. But as he said, if you wanted to come in here and say, okay, look, I'm taking this guy right off to here. I'm just taking that right off to there. Taking that whole top out, that whole top is gone. This is now the highest point in my tree, this right here and this right here, and this is my harvesting branch. Well, this piece is already dead. So this will just sprout out with sprouts going like that, but this will be your main branch. And you can do the exact same thing over there, but you don't have to. And see all the wounding and dead tissue up here?
Mm-hmm.
This comes from all kinds of things. Sometimes it's birds, but it's mostly insect damage from long ago, like cicadas or other borer insects. I don't consider those major issues. It's definitely not worth insecticides, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think a fungicide is worth spraying if we have really wet years, but an insecticide, yeah, that's sort of iffy.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless you really have an infestation that's killing them, like aphids or something like that, most of the time if you let nature take its course, the predators will take care of
Right.
the bad guys. Like ladybugs eat aphids.
Mm-hmm.
So bring in some ladybugs or something. The biggest problem with, of course, using any of the natural organic insect controls like other insects is they don't listen when you tell them to stay home. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
this is your orchard, stay here. Oh, I'm not staying, I'm going to your neighbors.
Yeah.
It's like, dang, I just spent $200 on natural insects, and ladybugs and all. But see, taking things out like this, dead stub, that helps the tree. Remembering the rule that try not to remove more than a quarter of the live tissue in any single pruning event and in any single growing season. Dead wood does not count. So if you're taking off dead branches, that doesn't count. I'm taking off this dead stub, that counts not at all towards my count of live branches. So I just get in here as close as I can get and say, okay.
What about bats?
Bats are very good.
Yeah.
If you can get a bat house going, that's awesome. if you have some big old trees with hollow spots in them, you'll have bats, especially the little brown bats. Let's see if I get a little bit closer right there. Yep, and it just broke off. See, the callus tissue will try to close that wound. We're just going to make it easy.
So are you going to leave that branch that your left hand is on?
This?
Yeah.
Well, for now, I'll leave that to you guys to decide whether or not you want that.
But would you leave that?
Would I? I might consider taking that one
Because
off.
it's kind of rubbing against,
It is
potentially
rubbing against
rubbing.
the other one, but it's more because it's low.
Okay.
And I'm looking at that, okay, this is low enough. I'm going to get enough fruit off of these live branches here. This one maybe even be dead. I'm not quite sure. But first things first, before I take any live branch off that's even low, I'm taking the dead wood out first. And once I take all the dead wood out, then we'll see. Because you may want to remove that branch, but it might be better to just wait one more year.
Okay.
I've pruned enough off of this. I've pruned all these interior suckers off of here. Yeah, you could probably get away with taking that one. I'd look at it on especially this tree. First things first, like he said, prune a lot of these things out of the interior. Take a dead piece off. Then if that's not too bad, then I would come here and start with my lowest branches. Because look at this branch right here. You could take this piece off. Well, this piece could be your new branch. And guess what? It goes up and over. So I can get underneath that. Even he can walk underneath that if all the rest of these things, like this piece is gone and this is all gone. Well, that could be another branch. Now there's another guide, sort of, and this will give you an idea of what we're talking about when they have another one. It's another thing called the 1/3 rule. The 1/3 rule is this: if I cut this branch off, what I cut back to, the piece I'm leaving, should be at least 1/3 the thickness of this. And that's so this is enough to keep this alive. So if I'm only cutting back to this little tiny piece, I cut this off right here, and this is a little tiny piece, that's not going to be enough, and that's not going to be enough leaf surface to pull water nutrients out here to keep this alive.
Okay.
So this piece will probably just die
Okay.
anyway. So when you cut back to something, I'm cutting back to, oh, that piece is the same thickness as this almost. So that's perfectly safe. I cut back to here. That's at least 1/3 the thickness of this. Probably
Okay.
half, 50%. Perfectly safe. That's too small. So that what that simply means is that was a rule that's put in to keep people from doing that topping thing. Yeah, what LSU students called crepe murder.
Yes.
Because they do it on crepe myrtles all the time.
Yeah.
But people do it everywhere. And people at home, and the homeowners, will do that to the fruit trees thinking they're reducing the height. It doesn't work. Always cut back to the next joint or crotch. And if you can remember the 1/3 rule, what you cut back to, the piece you're leaving, should be at least 1/3 the thickness of what you just cut.
Okay.
If you can do that, it's going to stay alive. But exactly like he said, is that I'm cleaning it out first, seeing what's damaged. And you may see some damage on the tree and it's not dead. Say, okay, I don't know what damaged that branch before. Could have been a fungus, could have been a canker. And a canker really is simply a fungus that attacks woody tissue, as opposed to a leaf spot.
Okay.
Okay, so what caused the canker could be any one of a number of things. Any little slight wound, even from like a cicada. You know, this year we're supposed to get the 13-year cicada come out. Well, cicadas, what they do is they'll come out, they'll mate, and they lay their eggs usually on the underside in slits in branches. So you make these slits and they lay their eggs in there. The eggs take that year to hatch out and they drop to the ground and become grubs for 13 years. And that's
Wow.
what they do. They feed on the ground for 13 years. There's a 7-year and a 13-year. Well, for 13 years they feed on the ground. Now that's a grub that gets to be about the same size as your pinky. That's a big grub. Great for fishing. Great for fishing. But if you see a lot of raccoons and other wildlife like possums digging around in here, it's because you got a lot of grubs.
Okay.
Okay, now you can treat for grubs in your lawn. I don't recommend it. One of the best things you can do in an area like this is aerate your soil. Whether you get a tractor and a big drum or just drill holes or whatever, just aerate your soil. Now, out here, I wouldn't worry about it too much because there's not a whole lot of foot traffic out here. The only traffic you get here is mowing the lawn. So a tractor with balloon tires is going to be pretty safe. People walking aren't going to compact the soil that much, so I wouldn't worry about it too much.
The guineas probably pick out the grubs too.
Yeah.
Because they're good.
What's that?
The guineas probably help
Oh.
pick out the grubs because they're
Oh,
good
yes.
bug
Any
eaters.
fowl that you have,
Yeah.
especially the ground pecking fowl, they will love it. They'll actually dig. You'll see them digging,
Yes.
and they'll find their grubs.
Mm-hmm.
You betcha. That's a big, big plus for keeping ground-based insects under control is any kind of fowl. But keeping fowl is a whole new challenge itself. I wouldn't do it, but then, you know, it's fun, I guess. We've got neighbors near us that have, I know they have chickens because we hear the roosters. And it's funny because we're just outside the city line in Chattanooga. We're in a county. That house is definitely in the city line, and there's laws against it. But nobody's ever pushed it. I love it. You get up in the morning on my back deck, I can hear a rooster off the distance. It's like, well, I live in the city, almost in the city limits, and I can still feel like farm country out here. It's like this. This is just gorgeous. That drive coming out here is just absolutely beautiful. But if you notice on the drive coming through, you see the big green rhododendrons that are sitting there? You notice where they're really doing well is in that tight valley where the big hillsides on each side. That holds the humidity, moisture, and temperatures right area. You take a rhododendron and put it out in a suburban lot, and it's real wide open, well, they just get roasted and fried and overheated. That's why they don't do well. And I get calls all the time. The rhododendrons aren't doing well. Azaleas aren't doing well. It's because they're not in their environment. They're just not. That roadway coming out here, not 4
On 30?
Yeah, 30. It winds through the hills. You can see what it looks like. I mean, you see that more up in Gatlinburg, and just the more you get to East Tennessee, where the hills get a little bit tighter, and those valleys hold the humidity in and the cooler temperatures all the time. That's where you're going to get your plant growth. This, like I said, this is actually a really well-placed orchard. Nicely well done. Water growing, filling that basin over there is going to seep through here and keep these irrigated. It's plenty low. It's a right slope. They just been neglected. That's all, just been neglected.
So would you say that this tree and this tree are probably too close to each other?
Nah, you can let these grow together for a while. Yep.
Do you think this, so this is passively irrigating this? Do you think this water?
That could be passively irrigating. Absolutely.
That is cool.
Especially as the water level gets up. Because of course you have that rock down here, then churned and clay like that, and then you have a thin layer of topsoil, which is organic matter. Well, when the water's down here, no problem. It's just going to sit there, and water goes gravity, so it goes straight down. But when it gets filled up after a rain like this, it gets up to that level, of course it's going to flow right over where that organic matter soil is. So it will help some. But the good news is that basin holds water at all when we get to really hot, dry times. If you have any water source in there, just a little pump.
Irrigate it.
Yeah, just use a pump and just irrigate along there. And that's simply a matter of, let's pump out and flood this area here. You know, just pump out some water until it floods it, then move a pipe over there and flood it.
Okay.
When you irrigate for trees, the best way to do that is to flood, saturate the ground once, and let it go for a week. Even in the heat of drought. You know, just the idea is to saturate the ground, because the more water gets in the ground, it pulls down through its adhesive capabilities, pulls water down to the roots. So that's what you want, is a big mass of water going down like this. A little bit of water on top doesn't do anything. It goes this far and then evaporates. So when you water trees, water them to soak them. And then walk away for a week, because that'll stay in the soil for a long time.
And that's fig trees as well?
Any tree.
Any tree.
Yep, just about any tree. And it's the woody tissue that makes the difference. Because the woody tissue makes up the cells that make up the root system too. Now, they are slightly different cells. They're built differently because they're underground. So you'll notice that roots don't have a real thick bark. They don't have to keep sunlight and air from drying out the cells directly underneath. But there is a bark paraderm there because there is growth. And they do the same thing. That's how roots break through the ground, is they grow underneath the ground. Here's the ground level, roots grow like this. Well, as they get thicker, that's how they break through. Because the finger thickness is now going to become arm thickness. Well, at this level, no problem. But now, the soil is like there, now it starts breaking through. So when people say, oh, my maple tree, the roots are all up out of the ground because it's a maple. No, it's because we live in Tennessee. So all trees will do that. All trees will do that. Wherever roots grow, that's where they're going to come out of the ground. But no, I don't think that these two are too close, at least not yet. As they grow in time and these tree trunks get to be as thick as the ones over there, yeah, maybe then you can. But I think you can also keep them pruned to keep them separated. I mean, let's face it, you could take the whole side. I mean, take this whole side branch off of here and still have a 3/4 tree over that way and still get plenty of fruit. So yeah, just The thing you want to remember is try to keep it so there's pretty good air circulation between the branches. So when branches are competing for space, pick and choose. If I got this guy here and it's up inside, that's good lateral branch coming this way, no problem. Where this guy here is coming up in there and he's competing for space. Well, I got a couple of choices. You can take it off right here. Just take that off right there and force it to flow. Now I just force that to this. But that might not be enough. I already got this branch in this space too. And I want this branch to have enough room and space. But once again, let's determine, is this one live or dead? So if this branch is dead, I might want this branch to become my branch there. But once you determine all that, this whole branch might just come off all the way down here. And that way you got, this guy's got space, this guy's got space, this guy's got space. The air circulation is going to help things dry out. And you'll be just fine. And see here, once again, determine. Okay, that's dead, that's dead, that's dead, but that's alive. So even though that's growing straight up, I might want to leave this because, you know what, that might be a fruit. There's a fruiting spur. This might bear me fruit, so I might keep this piece. What about this? Well, that's dead, that's dead, that's dead, that's dead. That's all dead. That's dead. Well, that determines that one. That's going to come back all the way back to there. So now that piece is gone. So now I might want to keep this piece. You get the idea.
Right, okay.
Yeah, determine.
So focus on the dead first and
Yeah.
then start trimming.
Yeah, and the good thing is take your time with these trees. Go with the thickest, heaviest ones like the pear trees first. That's where I would focus on getting the pruning done first. And then as you get into these trees here, it really is simply a matter of some of these are cherries, some of these are plums, some of these are peach.
Cherries, plums, peach.
So what is this?
Pretty bloom.
I'm guessing this is the plum tree. Just looking at the fruit. Now, cherry trees, you'll know they all, cherries, plums, and peaches all have the same kind of form and shape. They all have these horizontal lenticels, and the flower's going to look very, very similar, from a light pink to a dark pink. It really depends, but you won't tell until they really get out there. Say, oh, that's obviously a plum. I'm guessing that most of these are plum. Some of these might be cherries. This one's probably a cherry. I bet this are plum, and there also might be peaches in here. And just looking at the flowers. Like looking at this pink of this flower here, that's more than likely a plum. Peaches are usually darker pink than that, or lighter pink, and almost white. So, and you can see that one's a little bit different flower color.
Yeah, this is a different flower.
Little bit more of a coral color.
It's got an interesting little bud or something here. Is that?
Oh, that's an old fruit.
Is it?
Yeah, let's see. Is that a peach?
Open it up and see
Yeah, there you go.
what's
That's an
inside.
old peach. Yeah, it's either peach or a plum. I think it's an old peach.
Right now.
That's just a
Pink?
pit left to it.
Okay.
So I'm guessing that's a peach.
So that's
But once again, I've been at it for 40 years. Now I'm looking at these going, well, I don't
Yeah,
really know.
it's
I mean, you
hard
could try
to
to
tell.
tell by the flower. But, you know, there are
There's so
so
many
many
varieties.
tree ID, plant ID
Yeah, that's
things
true.
on
I've
here
got
right
one.
now.
Okay. That's
You
true.
can use a lot of those. Some of them are okay. You can just take your Google search and there's that little square, click and click on the flower and it'll tell you. But even that's only going to get you general.
Right.
And almost all the fruit trees, peach, plum, cherry, doesn't matter. They're all going to be certain cultivars or cultivated varieties. Now, you know what a cultivar is. There you go. So once they get into fruit and form, you'll be able to tell. But here, once again, if these are getting up real tall and you say, you know what, I can't even reach the fruit up there and there's no tree down here, there's not much tree down here, I need to bring that height down. Well, yeah, just you harvest the fruit this year and maybe next winter, or if you don't want to wait too late, you can bring this thing down to some sort of size. You see where it's already been broken off, and even that piece broke off. I'd say a lot of this breaking off is simply a matter of these trees are weakened from being not just ignored from the environmental conditions over the last several years that nobody ever paid any attention to. I mean, this thing should never have been allowed to grow out like that. It should have been cut back and reduced and kept more compact. But here it is now. And here you go. Here's a reactive stem that's only about 2 to 3 years old, all because that piece is gone. But look, even where this broke off, there's a stem. It's still alive. Even where this piece broke off, there's a stem. A lot of this piece right here may not be alive, but a lot of it might. And this piece right here, there's another branch right here. That piece is probably dead. That piece is probably dead. So you'll be able to tell, especially give it a little more time. there's no real hard line about when to prune. Okay, with trees, it's far more important that you prune correctly. You do branch collar cuts, thin the tree by no more than a quarter to a third of the tree at any one time, and then heading cuts if you need to, or topping cuts or anything like that can be done, in subsequent years. But right now, like I said, I don't know, if you can get this entire crew out here, we can get this orchard done in one day. We can get the whole crew out here. Okay, you got a saw, you got a saw, you got a saw, you're picking up branches. No, take your time. There's no real mad rush on this. I wouldn't worry about it so much. You get there when you get there. And prioritize which ones you want to focus on first. But as you can see, the natural form of these trees is much more open than the pear trees. They're
Right.
much more open. So you could probably get these to head back and cut back to a height and force them to be lower trees if you want. But if you can find one, these trees are not so big yet. You can get an old orchard ladder. You know what they look like? An old orchard ladder starts like this, comes to a point. And that's so they could take it and just put it right in the crotch, like that. And you can get an old orchard ladder and put it up in the crotch, and then you can start picking fruit. But you don't really have to either. Just like I said, you can decide, okay, the birds and bees will have those up there. We're going to harvest whatever we can reach down here. And once again, I don't know your entire situation, don't know your family situation. That's not what's important to me. What's important is you decide, okay, we're going to start harvesting these things for real serious harvesting. We don't just want to have fruit to pick to eat. We're going to start canning things. We're going to come up with a resource. Yeah, in about 2 or 3 years, you could have these things turned around, but you could really be producing. And I mean a fruit stand kind of thing where it supplement your income.
That's what we would like.
Nice.
Yeah, you absolutely could. It's just a matter of giving these things a little bit of attention. A little bit of attention, and they'll serve you really, really well. Yeah.
All
and a lot
of
of these
these
are still
trees, other than the one that's on the ground there, all of these are producible.
Yes, they're all producible, and even the pear trees
Fantastic.
that I would be a little concerned about. Let's just give them a little bit of time. A little bit of time, and we'll see where it goes. Yeah, absolutely. They're all producible. They're all potential fruit producers. And the more I'm looking at them, like I said, I can see some old hanging fruit in here. So this is probably an old peach or plum. Yeah, there's your peach pit.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really tall peach trees.
Yep. But you can harvest a lot off of these with just an 8-foot ladder, just an 8-foot step ladder. You can get a lot. And then once again, here again here's a great example of if I want to bring the height down. Now this is pretty low. This one's actually pretty low, so you can reach everything there. But if I want to bring the height down in any of them, here's how you do it. This piece here would get cut off. Let's see, get that guy out of the way. Right there. And you can see that's going away. This is now my low branches. Well, what will happen? These two guys, or if these weren't even here, new ones would sprout out right there and go straight up. But you could reduce the height by bringing this back to like right here. So you can get away with doing that if you really want to bring them down. And
Well,
like I
how
said,
would you do that in this situation where there's really nothing to cut down to?
That's a big challenge now, isn't it? You got to do a piece at a time.
Okay.
You just got to you would come up here and say, okay, I'm going to bring that long piece back to that joint and crotch where the 3 or 4 of them come out, and just cut all 4 of those pieces stubbed off, but that'll sprout out again. Then that's going to force more sprouts out down here.
Okay.
You're going to have sprouts like this by the hundredth.
Okay.
Okay, the more you cut it off. Let's say you cut this off right here. Let's say I'm cutting 1, 2, 3 cuts. I'm going to leave this as a stub, ending right there, and right at this joint, and make those 3 cuts. Well, right at that joint, sprouts like crazy. But guess what? All the way down here, sprouts will come out. And that's what you're trying to do, is force them out down here.
And then you would just cut up there later in a
Exactly.
couple of years because then you have more. Oh,
Following year,
okay.
you can go up there and determine, okay,
Okay.
I'm going to cut
That's
back to
pretty
the
cool.
next joint.
So we're better
Okay.
off cutting those 3 off rather than cutting it far back where it's just one cut.
Yes,
altogether.
exactly. Anytime you come back to the joint or crotch, you want to come above the joint or out from the
Gotcha.
joint or crotch. So if I had to come here, I'd be making 2 cuts
Right.
as opposed to 1 below. Only
Gotcha.
because where the joints are, that's where the majority of buds are located. Because
Gotcha.
the way a tree grows is, it's almost like toy sticks, where like magnet sticks. Where you got the stick like this little round magnet here. Well, that's where all the buds are.
Right.
And then all the stick growth, well, there's hardly a buds there. But with fruit trees, you will have a whole lot of adventitious dormant buds that do this kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And see what happens as the tree grows, it makes these little cells, these little buds right there, and say, just sit there. You've already made this, where this sprouted out from, the bud that this came from is sitting there just dormant, just waiting, because the trees have evolved with, okay, we get storms. So if a storm breaks us in half, I've got to be able to produce something. Well, I can't just make the buds and then do it. I've got to have the buds sitting there waiting. So
Gotcha.
they'll push out all kinds of buds. Well, which is why storm damage in the fall can be a lot more damaging than if we had a storm or tornado come through and wipe everything out today. Well,
Right.
it would respond by this year. You see them come back. So, and where I live in East Brainerd, where the tornado came through last year, there's a lot of trees still standing, but they're sprouting out. There's not much of the tree left. You know,
Right.
it's 40 feet up and it's broken off. Well, you can see the sprouts all along the tree.
Right.
Unfortunately, they're still standing, but they should come down. Because what happens is now the middle of the tree, you can see it right here. The middle of the tree is dead wood. That's dead cells. It's never going to reanimate. So the callus tissues closing the wound, trying to compartmentalize. The acronym is that actually has been made up is called CODIT. C-O-D-I-T. It's compartmentalization of damage in trees.
Right.
That's the process trees do when they get wounded.
Right.
Because the middle of the tree is made up of cells that don't function.
Gotcha.
So once they're exposed to the elements, they die, and then they start to decay.
Gotcha.
So when the tree closes the wound, that's the best thing for the tree. But that's how a whole tree can be hollow in the middle and still be alive. But that's where we have dangerous trees. Because let's say, these would never be dangerous because they're never going to be big enough. Worst case scenario was this. It broke,
Right.
we got something to clean up. All right, so if I want to keep this part of the branch here, and I think that's still alive, I'd be cutting this off right here. Okay, but if I don't think this is alive enough, I'd be cutting it off right here.
Right.
Now, a lot of these trees, because they have been neglected, also have some issues where you see the sap coming out. They could be really infested with borers. The most common borer for fruit trees is called the clearwing apple tree borer. It goes after any fruit trees. And it's a little waspy kind of fly, but it's, of course, it's the eggs and the larvae that do the real damage.
Okay.
There is no good way to get rid of them without a chemical. And you have to spray, topical spray over the trees to coat the chemical on here, so when the eggs hatch out here, they go to burrow into the tree, they ingest the chemical. That's how you control it. They don't always kill the tree, because what they do is they go underneath the bark and they make these galleries. Now some make galleries like this, and that can girdle the branch. Some make galleries like this. Many make galleries that are you're just all over the place, and they don't necessarily kill the whole branch. So if they're really loaded and infested with borers, that may eventually kill the tree, but once again, birds will go get them. Once they start going after them, that's when you see the birds on your tree going, I can hear that grub in there. That's what I'm going after. Because most of the borer insects that damage fruit trees, they're not going any deeper than just underneath the bark. And then there's galleries just in that cambium layer that they're chewing on. Some of them, like, what's the one that hits ornamentals? It's called the granulated ambrosia beetle. Well, the granulated ambrosia beetle rarely goes after fruit trees. They go after ornamentals like crepe myrtles. They bore straight into the tree. And then they do a few little galleries, and they lay their eggs, and then they lay this ambrosia fungus. The fungus grows in their galleries, and that's what the young feed on. They don't actually feed on the tree. The problem is there's billions of them at a time. So when the eggs hatch out, they come out and they drill 1,000 holes in this tree, and then you get these little toothpick brass things coming out. You're going, what the heck's going on with my tree? That's it. But once again, I don't worry about that with trees like this, these fruit trees. You see the pitch coming out here? That does not necessarily mean it has borers in there.
Okay.
That pitch could be the fact that you got a wound right here. Callus tissue's growing, well that dead tissue is decaying. As that dead tissue is decaying, it's producing gases and liquids from just the decay organisms. As the microorganisms, the fungi, feed on the dead tissue, they produce gases that can push out the pitch. The pitch is a reaction from the tree to try to eject whatever's going on inside the tree. That's what it does, try. I'm going to encapsulate you and eject you.
Like our body does.
That's what it tries to do. It's just when you're really infested, sometimes it just can't keep up.
Okay.
And that goes back to, again, if it's really neglected, then you can have a bit more of that.
Can something like neem oil help? Because
With borers, rarely can it help, because once again, the borers, first of all, once they hatch out, you would have to time it so perfectly that they hatched out, but they haven't started to bore in yet. Because the neem oil has to coat and contact the insect.
how long does neem oil last on a tree